Hi, it's Mark out here with you today to take you through the second lesson in our 7-part series, New Shooter series. Today we'll be talking about trigger control. Trigger control is something that's hotly contested, and you can find a million videos about it, you can find a million articles about it. Hotly contested, but it really shouldn't be. As far as your basic shooting skills go, it's not real hard, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you today. As you know, in these videos, I won't be doing a lot of shooting, if any in some of them, but these are here for you to help you develop your shooting skills and to build a solid platform for everything else you're going to do with your firearm going forward. So today, this one will build on the one before. All of these videos will build on the one before them, and I'll be talking to you about the grip a little bit more today because that's necessary when we start talking about trigger control. So, number 2 in the New Shooter series on trigger control. Here we go. Just before we get started here, let me remind you about my guide here that teaches all of these lessons that I'm teaching in these videos, as well as teaches about how to correct errors that people develop as they begin to shoot and as they begin to develop their shooting skills. Common errors begin to develop in many people, and this shows how to recognize them and how to correct them. So the guide is very inexpensive, and it'll give you something you can put on your computer and read, or have on your phone and have with you, and it'll be very helpful to you as you go here. So today we're going to be talking about trigger control, and in all of these videos I will be talking a little bit about safety. Again, I'm using Glock 23 here for at least the beginning of this lesson right here on trigger control. So I will be opening the gun, nothing came out, taking a visual inspection of the chamber. There is nothing in the chamber that is physically checked now, and the gun is clear. So I am using an empty gun that is cleared for this lesson on trigger control. Now, I'm going to move in, I'm going to try to get in close to the camera and hope the camera stays focused here as I do what I'm doing here. But on this Glock here, what you're going to find out is, I mean, if you go out and you pick up 6 guns out of a gun case and ask if you can dry fire them, you'll notice that all of the triggers, if you're paying attention and noticing the trigger as you pull it, you'll notice that all the triggers feel a little different. But the reality is that it only takes a few seconds for an experienced shooter who has learned trigger control to deal with the trigger on any gun they pull out of a box. It's not difficult once you learn the basics. And once you learn the basics in these type lessons where you're working on your skills, shooting slow and shooting accurately and paying attention to all the details, once you learn this and you've put enough rounds through guns, you'll find that in doing the things you want to do for tactical training, shooting fast, running and shooting, whatever you're going to do, that your skills that you've developed doing what we're doing right here will play into all of that. In other words, your trigger finger's not going to do the same thing if you're running across a stage and you're shooting as fast as you can shoot at steel targets and all kinds of other targets. It's not going to be the same as while you're standing here doing it very slowly and paying attention to the details. But paying attention to the details now will give you trigger control when you get to where you're training to do whatever kind of shooting you're going to do, including for self-defense and all that type of thing. So your trigger control here will help your trigger control under a lot of different types of situations. Now that we've talked about the grip on the video before this one, trigger control plays into your grip like this. I'm going to get the gun ready to fire. What you'll see from traditionalists, and which I've taught people for years, is that when you are getting ready to fire your gun, you're on the target and your finger goes to the trigger, the pad of your finger must be right here on the trigger. In other words, it must be, making sure it gets focused, like this, where the pad of that finger is going to go right there. Not here, not way back here, but the pad of your finger. That's taught traditionally by people all over the world. Has been taught for decades that way. And today I'm going to tell you that ideally, that is an ideal placement for my hand, because my hands are average size. My hands are what you would call average size. I'm 5'11", my hands are average size, and on most guns that I pick up out of any gun case anywhere that are either compact or full-size duty pistols, my hand fits on that gun to where my finger lights right there on the trigger naturally with the pad of my finger. Even if you replace back straps and make it a little wider, a little narrow, it doesn't matter. When my hand goes on that gun, it'll slide right around there, and the pad of my finger goes right on that trigger right there, just like traditionalists have taught it forever. But it's not there with me because of traditionalists have taught it that way. It's because that's where it naturally lands. If my hands were 1.5 inches longer than they are right now, what I would have to do is do something very unnatural. I'm going to do it from the left side. I would have to do something very unnatural to make my finger fit on the trigger right on the pad. If my finger was this much longer, some of you have seen Hickok 45. I think he's something like 6'7". His hands are huge, and you'll find that his finger, when he watch his, if it shows him up close, got white paint on my finger, you'll see his finger going through some of those guns trigger guards that far, because his hands are so long he can't naturally put the pad of his finger on that trigger. He would have to bend his finger back to get that pad on there. So with his hands it doesn't work. For people with very small hands, they're still going to need to reach through, but they're going to have to change their grip. You don't want to minimize the amount of finger that goes on the trigger, like getting it right on your fingertip, which somebody with small hands might try to do that. That wouldn't be the best thing to do. The best thing to do there would be to adjust the grip. Just about every gun you pick up, you'll adjust a little bit to make sure that you can get the best shots, you can get the best trigger pull, you can get the best trigger control. So within the context of the grip that I've talked to you about in the video before, just be sure that you get your grip right first. Locking those hands in, getting that purchase on the gun, that vice-like grip, and then let your finger go through until it falls naturally on the trigger. Right there will be just fine. If it goes to the bend in your finger, if your grip is right and it's solid, you'll be fine. If your hands are huge and it goes all the way through into the second pad of your finger in the middle joint, that's okay too. As long as your grip is nice and tight and you've got that purchase on the gun and you're thinking about pressing that trigger, you'll still get the kind of trigger control that you need regardless of the size of your hands. Otherwise, it's good with average size hands. A lot of people's hands will fit right on these guns and will be able to put the pad of their finger on that trigger. So, it's a lot said for just a little bit of information there, but you'll find that there are traditionalists today that still will tell you any place besides right on the pad of your finger, no matter what size your hand is just a sin. Bottom line is, it's not. Where you can shoot it best is where you need to put your finger. Get that grip first, then see where your finger lands naturally to pull the trigger. One big factor in trigger control all the way through your life, as long as you shoot, no matter what you're shooting, is that trigger control, good trigger control, practice for good trigger control doesn't just come from blasting rounds downrange. It comes from dry fire practice. Now, my Glock takes dry fire quite well. This will take thousands of dry fires without damaging the gun, but check your gun's manual. A lot of guns don't issue any kind of warning whatsoever about dry firing. Some of them tell you it's okay to dry fire them. Others will say that if you dry fire them too much, it will actually void the warranty. So they tell you not to. They warn you not to dry fire them because of possible damage to the firing pin or striker. So in those cases, just to be safe, you'd want to get some snap caps. Snap caps, you can buy them in most sporting goods stores where guns are sold or gun accessories are sold. Snap caps will come in the bullet in a cartridge size. That's basically a fake cartridge, and in putting it in this gun right here, if I loaded a snap cap in here, dropping the striker on it hits what would be a primer on a fully loaded cartridge. So that keeps any striker damage from happening just because a striker drops on an empty chamber. And if that's a factor with your gun, get some snap caps, put them in there. If you have a hammer fired gun, you can just simply cock the hammer over and over and pull the trigger that way. On a striker fired gun, you can put one snap cap in there and just barely move the slide back, and it'll set the striker without ejecting the snap cap. So, but dry firing is going to be a big part of what you do to gain good trigger control. One of the biggest issues, obviously, when you're shooting and you need good trigger control and good grip, and the way that plays into your accuracy, is minimal movement in your gun when you pull that trigger. In other words, all guns are going to move. Once you pull the trigger and the round fires, there's going to be recoil. Recoil this way, a little recoil back this way. There's going to be recoil. The gun's going to move. But what you've got to control is when you pull that trigger, how much does that gun move in the trigger pull? Not in the firing, but in the trigger pull. Because if you yank that trigger, you don't control it, you don't control it carefully, your grip's not good enough on there, you'll jerk the gun to one side or you'll jerk it down. And that will throw your shot off by a good deal according to how far you are away from your target. So dry firing is important, and I'll show you one of the first factors in dry firing at home or anywhere else is making sure that you're getting minimal movement out of your gun when you pull the trigger. I'll show you how to do that now. Now obviously safety is of paramount importance here. You can do this at a range like I do here, that's great, but if you're going to practice at home, which a lot of people are going to do, obviously you have to have cleared the area you're in, you have to have cleared your firearm, you have to, I'm not saying you have to, but this is the thing to do. Make sure all ammunition is out of sight, nowhere on top of anything that you're around. Best if it's out of the room. Make sure there are no magazines around. Don't have any ammunition anywhere near you when you are doing this dry firing. Make sure that wherever you set up something to dry fire, your gun is going to be pointed at that target or whatever you're pointing it at in a safe direction, in a direction that would not hit anything or anybody or any animal that might be nearby, and that would not, if it fired, would not go through the barrier behind it if the gun actually fired. People new to guns, this may sound overblown, but all you have to do is get online and find all the deaths and destruction of people's hands, limbs, their pets, their kids. Just be careful with what you've got. Use that kind of safety measure and you'll always be safe. You'll never hurt yourself or anybody else. So what you're going to do here is you're going to set up a target somewhere safe, just like I just showed you, and you're going to, pointing at this dot right here on this target, and you'll see it from another camera over here. Right here is where I'm going to concentrate, and I'm right here within arm's reach of this dot. I'm going to take my gun, rack the slide to where it's ready to fire. I'm going to hold it up on that dot right there, and I'm going to get a sight picture, but I'm going to watch my front sight, and what I want to see is that my sight is moving as little as possible or none at all. When I pull that trigger, when you're looking at that sight and you're this close to the target and your sight is right here, you're going to be able to see even the most minute movement, sideways, down, wherever that goes, with the trigger pull. I don't know how many times I've been on a range with people over the years, and they'd be shooting. They're new shooters, and we tell them exactly how to do everything. They get down, and they get to the last shot. The last shot would go out, and they think they've still got a round, and they try to shoot again, and they do this because they're anticipating the shot, and they don't even realize it. That means that every shot that they shoot, they're doing this. That's why it's important to dry fire, to learn never to anticipate a shot and to keep that gun as still as possible while you're shooting. Irrespective of the recoil, it's what you do with that trigger and your grip that's going to determine where that shot lands. Recoil doesn't determine where your shot lands. What you do with your grip, what you do with that trigger is what determines where that shot lands. Dry firing, practice to see if you can keep that front sight perfectly still. There's no such thing as no wavering in your hands. Everybody's hands move a little bit when they hold them up. They've got that grip on it, but it's pulling that trigger on target that's going to make the difference. No movement in that front sight is what you're looking for. As you can imagine, you can dry fire all kinds of ways. You can do all kinds of dry fire practice. Again, I wouldn't do it too much. 5-10 minutes at a time, a few times a week will give you a lot of help in your trigger control. Doing it the way we just showed it there on that target, you can do it just like I did right there. Do it slow. Next day come out and do it again, or wherever you're doing it, and the next time come out and just do it as fast as you can rack the slide. But as fast as you can rack the slide and get that front sight up there where you can watch it on that target. Do it just as fast as you can to see how well you can control the movement in that gun when you do it. Otherwise, you can, as long as you're pointing that at something safe and have taken all those safety measures, you can practice coming from ready here up here. You can practice coming from ready here to here, racking the slide each time, racking the slide, just making sure that you've taken all the safety measures necessary to keep you and everybody else around you safe. Dry firing is a great way to practice. And again, I apologize that I'm not shooting because I know that's entertaining, but this is about dry fire practice, firing without shooting around. A practice that can make a huge difference in how well you keep that gun stabilized, how accurate you are, and how well you can shoot into the future. And all the things you might want to do to train, right here is where it starts. That grip, trigger control, dry firing is a great way to develop those skills to control that trigger every time you fire a shot. Thank you for being with me today. Don't forget, grab that guide right there if you think that would be valuable to you. All 7 of these lessons will be in it. Today, be sure before you leave, go down here and subscribe, hit that little bell that will make sure you have a notification when we put up new videos. I'll be along in the next video. Video number 3 will be on your arm placement. We've gone through your grip, trigger control. The next one will be your arm placement. How should your arm sit when you're learning to shoot? Completely rigid, back here relaxed, somewhere in between. How does your arm placement work in all this? We'll find out on the next one. Arm placement will build on your trigger control and grip. Everything will build on something else. And after that one, there will be your sight picture. So all of this will play into each other. They'll all play into each other, and they will all build on one another to help you build the best shooting platform that you possibly can as you're learning to shoot and developing your accuracy. So I'm Mark Rogers, and I will see you very soon in the next video in the New Shooters series.